Once again, this is Nuance, and I'm Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop MC, and the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Oh man, just taking it easy. Taking it easy. So
Yeah,
huh?
you mentioned last time, I believe, that it was going to be 80 degrees where you were at in Virginia.
That one day, it was 80 degrees that one day. And so I definitely got out, got some sun, did some walking.
Did it snow? Because here in New York, it snowed last night.
No, this whole winter, there was a light dusting one day on the ground, and that was it.
That's interesting, right? How crazy the weather has been. I mean, we're not that far apart between New York and Virginia. You're talking 80 degrees one day, we're talking snow. I mean, what's going on? And it's about to be March. Like I said last time, I'm ready for the spring. I don't need snow. I don't need the cold weather. Let's just forget the winter ever happened and get to the nicer weather.
I'm always ready for that.
Yeah. Though to be fair, we really didn't get much of a winter this year, so can't complain too much.
Like it's today the high was 66. It's 52 right now. So yeah, I mean at the end of February, but technically it's still winter. That's pretty warm.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't really know Virginia's normal temperature. So yeah. But I think it is a little bit warmer than usual.
Yeah. I mean, we actually mentioned this before. Virginia technically is considered the South, but it's really not far south. So the difference between New York and Virginia usually isn't that much in terms of weather.
Yeah.
So, well, I actually was going through some boxes earlier and I stumbled upon this, which I found kind of cool. Almost forgot about it. This is a resolution from the New York State Senate when I worked in Albany and I was working with Senator Jim Sanders. I got to draft this resolution when Prince died, and it celebrates the life of Prince. And it was funny because the senator would always tell me when something big happened, he would call me. He'd be like, get on this before someone else does. We want to have our resolution in first so that we can be the one to pass it. And it was a fun part of my job as legislative director because it wasn't about legislation, lawmaking. It was just about a resolution celebrating Prince. And it says up top here, mourning the death of Prince Rogers Nelson, known to the world as Prince, a pop icon, singer, songwriter, musician, record producer, actor, and distinguished citizen. And basically, it was like a book report because I had to research this. I had to figure out what to put in here. You can see here, it's formatted nice and fancy, but all these different clauses, the whereas clauses, talk about facts about Prince, and some of them is biographical information. Prince Rogers Nelson, known to the world as Prince, a pop culture icon, died on April 21st, 2016. He was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it has some of his bio, but then it goes on to list some of his accomplishments and why he should be celebrated by the state. It's funny because I guess part of what you do in that position could be kind of dry, writing laws. I mean, I have a passion for it, but I understand that it's kind of wonky. But this is not. This is fun, right? This is actually something cool that you could do. It represents the state of New York officially celebrating and recognizing the life and legacy of Prince. Something that you just sit in your office and research and write, and the state passes it, and there you go. Now the state of New York officially sees Prince for what he is. So I thought that was cool, and I'm glad I was able to save a couple of these.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something good. And I remember that that moment because we had a connection actually to Prince.
Oh yes.
Because there was the DJ that we used to do shows with, and she was connected with Prince. They were, good family friends and whatnot. So, yeah, I remember that time and reaching out to her just to check on her to see if she was all right. Because
Yeah, that reminds me. We were performing out in LA, and I remember we had a couple sets that night. So the first one that I did, I was interacting with the crowd a lot and kind of behaving as I would in a club in New York or where we used to perform in kind of smaller venues where it's like a more intimate hip hop setting. And between our sets, she pulled me aside and she was like, you can't act like you're in the clubs in New York. This is LA. This is the big stage. You're Prince now. And that was the example I used. When I go back out there, pretend I'm Prince. You're not this hip hop guy, interacting with the crowd directly. You're performing a show like you're Prince, and that always stuck with me. Like, here in LA right now, you're not the local MC in New York. You're Prince.
Yeah, that was I remember that trip. It was a pretty good trip too. That was the New Year's Eve show, and it was actually kind of ahead of its time in its way because it was being streamed in several different cities at the same time.
Right.
Having
simulcast.
Yeah, it was being simulcast, and each one of those venues were also having an event. And the one that we were at, it was like the audience was like 1,600 people, and there were 10 different venues around the country. So it was like a total of like 16,000 in the audience.
And it was played, I believe, online and on ESPN, or at least part of it was.
Right. But what was kind of interesting is, like, I don't remember, at least at that time, many events like that happening. It was kind of a first in that regard, because I don't think they were really streaming like that.
That was back in 2008 going into 2009. Yeah, so it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting, and guest list was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, you had Dr. Dre in the crowd. Really, I think he was kind of hiding out because he didn't want to be involved, but he was in the building. And yeah, a lot of celebrities. I think they said Axl Rose, and it was like the hottest ticket in town that year because it was DJ AM and
Travis Barker.
I was going to say Travis Scott. That confuses me now. Travis Barker, Blink-182. It was their first show together since the plane crash they were in earlier that year. And so a lot of people wanted to see them get back on stage together and do their thing. And we were fortunate enough to be part of that night. But I do remember when we went out there for the first time, people were, like in the front row, they were trying to talk to you, and people were trying to hand you the card. Like in LA, also everyone is in show business, right? That's the joke. But that's what you would get. But I'm used to being in a setting where that's part of the show, that's part of the experience. And because maybe there aren't, like you said, 1,600 people there. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 50 people or less. But that's cool also, because then the audience can become really part of the show, and you can really talk to them, and like everyone can hear what you're saying, like with a person to say maybe, and like it's a more immersive experience. But with this, when you have so many people, people on the back might not be able to see what I'm saying to people in the front or what they're saying to me, or so you have to kind of approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if we're on the stage, because if you got that many people and you do reach out to one person, that could just bring that rush of everybody. Oh, so he's accepting this now. Okay, well, here, let me get up.
It could take over the whole show too.
Right.
But also, you had the idea. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was between our sets that we were just going to walk through the crowd.
It was in between the sets. We did go out in the set. We did go out in the crowd, and
we did get mobbed because a lot of people were trying to approach us, like, "Hey, you guys were just on stage," but like.
Yeah. We hung out by the. I remember it was like the front right side of the stage, a little bit out in the crowd though. But yeah, I remember that. Warren G was also on the show.
Warren G was on the show. Paul Wall.
Crooked Eye was actually a guest with us.
Right. Crooked Eye was supposed to be the date of that DJ that we mentioned, but it was like a walk the red carpet type thing together.
Right. Yeah, not like an actual date. It was like they just show up, whatnot. But yeah, he was a cool dude. We hung out. And actually that night, I don't even remember what happened, but if you remember, we were supposed to go to Exhibit's party. Yeah, there was an after party for New Year's, and Crooked Eye was taking us all there. But I don't know what happened.
Food got in the way. I think it was either you or the DJ who said that you were hungry and we had to get food first. I think we ended up going back to the hotel to get room service because everything was closed in LA at that point. And I think we tried to get back up with Crooked Eye, but then we couldn't, or it was too late or something.
Yeah,
it was because of the food. Like we could have followed, and I'm still kind of upset. We could have followed Crooked Eye right to Exhibit's house and probably had food at his house, but like food was like the priority because we hadn't eaten, and we had to stop off someplace and get that, and that messed us up.
Oh, that's what that was?
Yeah.
I just remember being in the car and we were supposed to be headed out, and that was the next stop, and then just for some reason it just didn't happen.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I tweeted Exhibit after that, and I said, "I'm so mad. I was supposed to come to your house on New Year's after the show." And he responded. He was like, "Yeah, you should have come." He was like, "It's nothing but gunshots and roadblocks in LA past 2 a.m." He's like, "You should just come to the house."
Yeah. That was shortly thereafter though, because we did exchange numbers with Crooked Eye. I think I still have his number in my phone. It's probably changed since then. But he was like mad cool, then hung out, chilled. But shortly thereafter was when he got shot, and then he kind of closed his circle, and he just
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
not
Because they were doing the show. I think it might have been the Slaughterhouse show in New York City. Maybe only a few weeks after that. I think we were going to go, but I think he got shot right around that same time.
yeah. So he just kind of cut communication with everybody except for like his very inner circle. Because he was when we talked to him, and I was like, yeah, hit me up, we'll talk, blah blah blah. But it's like, I mean, and can't blame it, that-
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Exhibit was right, right? Gunshots and roadblocks.
yeah. But it was fun. It was good. Especially staying at the Mondrian, which if people listen, a lot of famous people stay there. That's like the spot.
Yeah, the Sky Bar as part of the venue as well.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, and then we got the VIP treatment. That's why I think I was spoiled that trip. Why that's why I hesitate to go back to LA. I'm like, it's not gonna be the same as last time because we were being driven around by a chauffeur. And I think was it a limo or it was a nice car, whatever it was.
right.
But we had our own driver that trip, and then we were getting free drinks even at the hotel bar because of the performance that we were doing and everything. Like we were treated like the celebrities of the weekend.
Right. So yeah. Although first thing after landing and we're headed to the hotel, we get pulled over by the police. We didn't even get out of the airport yet. No, cops are already on us for
There's video of that too. I found
Yeah.
that recently. You actually have that on video. So
yeah. So good times.
yeah. And I remember also this part always stuck with me. Sound check. Because we went to do sound check, and of course everything's all state of the art beyond what we were used to. Like, try this mic, I try that mic, a million different mics and different setups, and the board is all fancy and everything, and trying to make sure that it's perfect just for your voice, and everything's like all top notch. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I hope we're not taking too long to try to set this up because Travis Barker and DJ AM were trying to get on and do sound check after us. But when we walked out, it was still a daytime. I remember it was daytime in LA. We walked out to the side door, and I saw Travis Barker sitting I think it was in the passenger seat of an SUV. And, he heard us, he was, he's waiting the whole time, but he didn't look impatient at all. He didn't look like, oh, what are these guys doing and taking up my time? He was like, like the look in his eyes. It was like so professional, how calm and cool he was about the whole thing. He was like, yeah, these guys take as much time as they need. I'm coming in next. He wasn't coming in like, I'm Travis Barker, I got to go before you. Like, nah, he was acting like we belonged there with him. And, we were just on a show. He was on a show. And it was no big deal. And that put me at ease. I remember that thinking, okay, like we're being accepted here. Even DJ AM, right before we went on, we were talking to him. I think we took a picture with him also. And you asked him, how are you feeling? And he said to you, I'm a little bit nervous, man. And
Right.
all right, wow. So, even him, he's like the real big shot of the night, but even he has butterflies. And so all that kind of put you a little bit at ease to make you feel less alone in this crazy world you found yourself in.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I remember that. So yeah, it was definitely good times. I definitely missed some of those adventures.
Yeah, me too. And I remember, I think I had taken the LSAT already for law school, and I was talking about that. I was already in the process of going into law school that night. And I think I might even mention the Crooked Eye or whatever, and everyone was so cool about it. Oh, that's dope. But that kind of put me on a different path, although I never intended to get away from the music. It's just so hard to focus on too many things at the same time, and it's hard to make time for all these different things. But I definitely would like to. I'd like to bring that full circle. And so, hey, listen, I did go to law school. I am a lawyer. I'm doing all these things in politics. I just showed you working in Albany, these things with Prince, but that's even relating to the music. Like all the stuff can work together, and I can still put out music. I can still be who I am and just explore different facets of myself and what I'm interested in. And that should be cool for anyone to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know we've mentioned it before, like especially in the music, that there's a genre that we've been in hip hop doesn't often get that look, right? It's like, that's separated. Like if you were like a pianist or whatnot, no one would blink an eye at if you were a cellist or something like that. But being an MC or being in hip hop, people don't often look at that and say, okay, well, this can fit in these other types of worlds as well.
Right. They don't see the same value in it. Like, look at guys back in the day, now we call it Renaissance men, because they were lawyers in some cases, or activists, or founding fathers, whatever they were. They were big shots in their time and in their countries and in their world. But they were also on music, and they also were painters, and they were in the arts. And so, to me, what I want to do is really no different from that. It's just a modern version of that, and hip hop should be accepted. If I could do hip hop and law, hip hop and politics.
Right.
That's my version of being a Renaissance man. It's no different from Da Vinci being a painter, and you know what I mean. Like, to me, it's the same type of deal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Hip hop just doesn't always get that respect, so to speak. It's always looked at as, oh, that's just that thing. It doesn't.
Right. It's otherized.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
Not at all. Especially we're in the 50th year.
Say that 50th year. Yeah.
It's one of the biggest things out there. It's the biggest movers of culture, pop culture, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Right. And it's the #1 genre on streaming platforms worldwide.
Yeah. That small homegrown New York, culture sparked an international movement. So
yes,
that definitely deserves respect that we give it. Everyone else should respect it as well.
Speaking of respect or lack thereof, Judge LaSalle getting no respect from the Senate Democrats. For those who don't know, Governor Kathy Hochul nominated Hector LaSalle to become the chief judge of the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. So he would be the highest judge in the state. And he's run into roadblocks, right? The progressive wing of the Democratic Party has opposed his nomination from day one, citing his friendly labor decisions and some of the things that he's done. And they've convinced the Democrats that control the Judiciary Committee, which confirms these appointments, not to go forward with his nomination. But the weird thing about all this, I find it weird at least, is that it's the Republicans now who are fighting hard for him, or at least they're trying to fight against what the Democrats and the Senate are doing. But let's not forget, this is a Democratic appointee. Governor Kathy Hochul is a Democrat, right? She nominated, but what you're seeing here is the split in the Democratic Party between the more mainstream or moderates, if you want to call them that, and the more progressives. And since they're at war, in a sense, it allows the Republicans now to come in and support the mainstream Democrats against these progressives. And it's not all about partisanship, but that's how it's breaking down in this particular case. And they say politics makes for strange bedfellows. You're seeing that. And now we're seeing litigation over this too. So it's creating a whole mess.
Yeah, that definitely, politics makes strange bedfellows. Definitely an apt saying.
Yeah. So there's litigation over this. This gets a little technical for some. We didn't really get into it too much on here. I know we touched upon it one week, but what's going on in the courts now is the Republicans are trying to force a full floor vote, right? They want to vote on the floor of the Senate for the confirmation of this judge. Okay. However, in anticipation of all this playing out, the Democrats gave him a vote in February and it failed. And so on the one hand, you might look at this and say, well, then isn't the case moot because he got the vote already? So what are the Republicans doing? But it seems like they're trying to set precedent here where they want the judge to come out, obviously not this judge, right? The judge in the court that they're in. They want the court to say that the process mandates a full vote before the entire Senate every time, right? So what's happening now is that there's a committee called the Judiciary Committee, and that's their job to look at this. But because the Democrats have control, they've got the majority of the state Senate, they control the committees. And so most of the people on the committees will also be Democrats. And so this smaller committee, right? It's much smaller than the full Senate. This committee of senators are the ones who initially shot down this judge. And the Republicans don't want that system. They want a system where the whole floor of the Senate gets to vote. And so the question before the court, if you're going to say that this isn't moot anyway, if this is actually going to be decided, the question is going to be, how was it intended by the framers of this framework, right? When they first put this into place, did they intend it to be the entire Senate? Because all it really says is that the Senate has to confirm, right? It's the same language that you see even at the federal level, the advice and consent of the Senate. It mirrors what happens when the president puts someone forward, right? The US Senate has to confirm them or not. So this is happening at the state level. And so there were articles now, I saw some studies being done going back to when this was first being enacted. It seems like the intent legislatively was for the entire Senate to have to weigh in on it. But historically, the practice has been that the Judiciary Committee handles it. It's looked at as the Senate delegating that responsibility to this committee. This committee is there for that purpose. And so that's going to be the question, right? Should the entire floor vote on it or not? But like I said, in this particular case, the floor did vote because the Democratic conference vote was happening. So they took a preemptive move. They put it before a vote and it still failed. So.
Right. I mean, up until now, in practice, has it been in the way that the Democrats carried it out this time, or has it been in the way that the Republicans want them to do it?
No, it's been up to the Judiciary Committee.
So they've been okay with it up until it's something that, this particular, decision. They've been okay with it in previous decades.
Well, they haven't challenged it in the same way.
Right. So.
But that's not the legal inquiry, right? I mean, You could maybe make that argument if we were going to argue the case to try to challenge their credibility, to say, come on, they don't even really believe this because now all of a sudden this is obviously a political move. But ultimately, the legal inquiry is going to be, what does the legislation entail? I mean, part of it is legislative intent. Part of it is, when they say the advice and consent of the Senate, does that mean the entire Senate? Does that mean just the committee? Well, you have to look at what the framers said on the Senate floor, what has been said about that, what's happened in other places, other precedent. You got to look at all these different factors. You got to parse the language carefully, and we'll see where they come out on it. I just think the whole thing is a mess. It's really kind of odd. I mean, you don't really see this. This just shows how divided we are, that the Republicans now are, in essence, teaming up with the governor, with the more mainstream Democrats. But you can't even really say that. And you can say the governor, you can't really say the mainstream Democrats, because in the Senate, the Senate Democrats decided they were going to not support this judge effectively, right? So it was certainly the progressive wing that made the most noise on this, and labor and other forces, but the Democrats kind of came to this consensus, separate and apart from Kathy Hochul, the governor, who still wants his confirmation. But as a whole, the Democratic body is saying no. The Republicans are challenging that. I mean, and why? If this infighting wasn't happening, would the Republicans be so eager to confirm this particular judge, a Democratic appointee?
Now, Lix in the chat brings a point. She said, I think it makes sense. We vote for the state senators to represent us. Therefore, they should vote on behalf of their constituents instead of a small committee. So, and that point is valid, I think. And so in that question, if you're doing a small committee, does that committee, is that representative of what is in the larger body?
Right. Well, the thing is this. So there are all different types of committees in a legislature. It's just a way of breaking it down. You're essentially breaking down the work into smaller chunks to make it more manageable. And so you have committees dedicated to all different areas of law. So what would happen is, like when I worked in Albany, I would come up with a bill with the senator. I would have to physically carry it over to this office where they would take it in and they would process it. And one of the things that they had to decide is which committee would it be assigned to. And it's assigned to committee based on the body of law that you're trying to affect, right? And sometimes it's more than one. Sometimes you have a bill that might do a bunch of different things, but they look at the first thing or the main point of it and they'll say, okay, this best belongs in this committee. And so each committee then is comprised of individual senators. So it's true that we vote for our state senator, but we're voting for a legislative body that we know is then going to delegate some of this responsibility to different senators, right? Every senator can't be on the committee for everything. Now, this is a little bit different because we're not talking about legislation here. We're talking about the confirmation of a judge. And so you could say that anyone should have just as much of a right as anyone else in the body to weigh in on it. But this has also been decided by committee. There's a Judiciary Committee that looks at this. They do the hearings, for example, right? And they bring them in and people can ask questions. And even in these hearings, okay, these senators are there who are part of that committee and they're the ones running the show, but it's also open to the public and they can weigh in on different things. They could read comments from people. They're kind of putting it before the people of New York through the senators, but also through these public hearings that they have, and they do fact finding. They kind of, they vet the person. All of the senators aren't going to be taking on that kind of role, right? You're not going to ask every senator in New York to do research vetting a judicial appointee because there's just so much going on they got to worry about. So that's why it's delegated to a particular committee. But that's just how the body is set up, right? You're voting on the senators. The senators then choose a majority leader, and the majority leader then picks out these committees and who's on the committees. And so it's just all part of the legislative process and the democratic process.
Yeah. But when it comes to the vote, though, are the people in the committees voting that are voting, are they representative of the makeup of the floor itself? Like, is it heavily weighted one side over the other in contrast to what the actual senators are?
Well, it's hard to gauge that because the question is, how are they going to be alike or dislike? So what you do see is this: if the makeup of the body is majority Democratic, the makeup of the committees are also going to be majority Democratic, and that's done to retain control. Really, if it's a Democratic controlled body, they don't want the Republicans to take control of these committees and shoot down all of their bills, and vice versa. And so that's why you see that. So there will be Republicans on the committee, but they will be the minority party in all of the committees. You do see a majority of Democrats, which does mirror the composition of the Senate. But now it doesn't mean that every aspect is mirrored perfectly. Like if you're saying the disparity between upstate and downstate members, or progressive and more moderate members, or people of color and white members, that's not going to be exactly mirrored in every committee. It just can't be.
Right. Yeah. And I think with that reality, that does open up the question of whether it should be a vote on the floor, because it's like, well, this committee doesn't actually fit the same picture of the whole body. And so I can see where people could be like, we need to take that vote to the floor in that regard. It says, for Supreme Court justices, it's decided on the floor. Maybe for major positions, it should be decided on the floor on the state level as well. And I think that's kind of what they're going to be basically deciding here. This, this back and forth they're doing, right? To make this set this precedent.
Hold on a second, because even, and maybe Lixa knows more about this, but my understanding was at the federal level, the Senate Judiciary Committee can shoot down a nominee, right? Before it gets to a full floor vote, doesn't have to pass the committee. I thought that's how the process worked.
Don't give me the line. That sounds right, but it could be very different. We're getting a yes. That's how it works. So I mean, if that's the case, then I mean it's not dissimilar to what's happening here.
Right. So the Republicans are saying that even if the state Judiciary Committee blocks the appointment, they should all be entitled to a vote.
Right.
And so really what you're doing is you're weakening the power of the committees by doing that.
Right. Because then it's like basically you got to go over and second guess or recheck what they're doing. Like, yeah.
Right. It's funny because there was always this song and dance that happened in the legislature where first you always had to get your bills through committee before it could proceed to the floor. But just because you got it through committee didn't mean it was going to the floor either. And I remember there would be this thing like I would high five all the interns and I'm like, yes, we got it through the committee. And then sometimes I'll play this game where they would say, okay, let's say it's a bill on paying for something transit related, right? The state should subsidize some transit costs. First, it'll go to the transportation committee. and you get it through the committee. And just because it's in the committee doesn't mean it's going to get a vote in the committee either. You have to go, you got to convince the chair of the committee, it really means their staffer, to put it on the agenda, right? And so there's formal paperwork you got to file, all these different things, but basically you got to convince them. We talked about the cocktail parties, and whoever you do it, you got to convince them to put it on their agenda, because there's just so many bills. They're not going to vote on everything that's introduced. So you convince them to put it on the agenda. Okay, it gets on the agenda. It gets a vote in the committee. Let's say it's a transportation bill, right? Say it passes the committee. Now you're celebrating. Oh, well, wait a minute. It also had a financial component, because you're saying that you want the state or the MTA to subsidize some of it. It's going to affect the state budget somehow. So now it gets flagged for finance. It might pass transportation in the first committee it's in, but then it goes to the finance committee. And then the process starts all over again. Now it's sitting in the finance committee. Now you have to try to convince the finance chair to put it up for a vote. Okay, you go through the whole process all over again, right? And this could take weeks of you pestering them, or months. And the session is only 6 months long, don't forget. So, the clock is ticking, right? You finally get it through finance. Let's say there's like a week or two left of session. You're like, all right, now it gets a floor vote. Then it's got to advance to what they call third reading before it even gets a vote. But the reality is that it goes back to the majority leader. They have to decide, or if it's in Congress, it's the speaker, or in the city council, it's the speaker. But the person who is in control of that legislative body, they decide which bills get put up for a vote before the floor. So even if it passed the committee, you're not guaranteed a vote. And so you kind of start to feel like the committee process is a joke in a sense, because you went through this whole song and dance, and you kind of back to square one with the speaker, like, yeah, but we don't really like that bill.
Right. And
so what did the committee do? I mean, so the committee can block something, right? They could defeat a bill, but they don't really have the purpose. They don't really have the power to pass it, though.
Right. And where did we learn about this process in general? I believe Lixa brought it up in a previous show, and wait till she puts that in the comment below.
Schoolhouse Rock or something.
Say it again.
It's like Schoolhouse Rock or something.
Yeah, Schoolhouse Rock.
Did they go into that much detail though? I don't think so.
He went into saying that it can start at the local level, it can go to a committee, it has to pass these committees. If it gets past the committees, if it doesn't pass the committees, then it doesn't go through. But if it does, then it goes to this other thing, and then it did a pretty good overview of it.
That was all on Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock, it was, and that was "I'm Just a Bill."
Yeah, I remember that. I know it was that detailed.
Yeah, Bill.
I got to live it firsthand.
Yeah, so those were some good educational programs there.
Yeah, because remember now, there was a movie about Anita Hill that came out not too long ago, and it was about Thomas's appointment to the Supreme Court. And Biden actually was part, I think he might have been the chair of judiciary at that time. So he played a major role in that. And some people thought that he didn't treat Anita Hill with enough deference when she was making those accusations. So, yeah, I mean, it does go to a vote in the judiciary, and they can block it.
Yeah. Well, guess we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's just funny because you would also expect that the court would say this is moot because there was already a vote. That's what the Democrats are arguing now. Why are we even arguing this? There's no injury here, right? I mean, you're talking about the process, and that's all well and good, but the court is supposed to only rule on justiciable controversies, right? How is it even in controversy if there already was a vote on it? You're saying, hey, we want to vote. You had a vote. So
right.
Pick a different test case at this point.
Yeah. Question in the chat: can members of the committee have an equal amount of progressive Democrats and moderate Democrats? It's a joke, but yeah, I mean, I think we're at that point where everyone is asking questions like that, but it's not really realistic because you don't know.
Yeah, and also
you don't know who the makeup of the body is. There might not even be that equal level of these different subgroups of whatever the groups are.
Yeah, and you're not going to have all these different committees and have them align perfectly in terms of the ideological makeup of the whole body. That's not feasible. But also, those distinctions are a little arbitrary, right? I mean, we as pundits or as observers or voters, whoever, like to categorize people, oh, this person's moderate, this person's conservative, this person is progressive. But I mean, ask them. Ask the senators, how do you classify yourself? They might get a whole bunch of different answers. Maybe they're progressive on some issues, but conservative on other issues. So how do you really draw those lines? It's not like a political party that they're running with.
Right. And I think that's that is a part of like nuance there, right? Because some, like you said, some people you can be conservative on some issues, you can be progressive on other issues, and that's just a part of being a person. And so, that defeats that all or nothing approach. Although, in general, you can be a more progressive or more moderate type.
Right. Of, I mean, but how would they even measure that? So are they going to give everyone an ideological test before assigning them committees? I mean, that's not really how the world works. It's just kind of how we like to classify people. We like to put labels and everything, but there are shades of gray in the real world. And it's also useful to break up these committees based on areas of expertise. And so, let's say someone has experience with transportation. You might put them on the transportation committee. If they're, maybe they come from criminal defense, you might put them on the codes committee, which deals with criminal offenses. And so as the leader of the body, I think you're looking not only at partisan lines and makeup, but you're looking at who best serves us, who's best qualified for these different roles in terms of their backgrounds. Sometimes you might have, maybe for a committee, you might want more people from upstate if it deals with more rural subjects. What if the committee deals mostly with farming? You don't want to put a bunch of New York City senators on that. Maybe you might have a few, but you want to have more people who can relate and deal with those topics more, even if the makeup of the body, let's say, is more downstate progressives. It doesn't mean that a committee that deals mostly with farming issues is going to be that, right? Because it doesn't really make sense.
Right. But there is,
the way it's supposed to work is the committee is like an area of expertise that the committee is not supposed to necessarily represent the body. That's why you do put things to a floor vote ultimately, right? And so if the committee says, listen, we are considered, for better or worse, the experts, or the people who are given the authority to speak on this particular subject matter, we are making these recommendations. Okay, so if they recommend it go forward, the floor still gets to weigh in and potentially defeat it if it doesn't fit their needs.
Right.
So it's useful to have that. If there was a group of more rural senators from upstate saying that, our committee recommends that this will best serve the farmland of New York. Okay, great. You can make that recommendation because you're in a better position to speak on that than we are. Now we're going to look at it and we're going to make our own decision, but we're going to take your recommendations into account.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it can be difficult to make those classifications as far as individuals. However, we can look at their histories and at their actions to kind of gauge. Like, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene does not belong on the Department of Homeland Security or the Homeland Security Commission. That's just utterly ludicrous, especially when she's out there now basically advocating for secession and civil war. Like, that's ridiculous to me.
Right.
Not the smoothest transition, but
how can you be smooth with this? This is just
right. She doesn't belong on any committees. She doesn't belong in Congress. And one thing that this rhetoric that she's talking about, and for those who might not be aware, like last week, she went out publicly and said that she's calling for a national divorce of red states and blue states. I mean, this is,
how asinine that is, though. There really isn't, not to sound all Obama in 04, but there really isn't a such thing as a red state and a blue state. Again, we like to label everything based on how they tend to vote on the whole in presidential elections and who they voted for. But you go into any of these states and you're going to see cities and college towns and areas where they're more Democratic. And then you're going to find more rural regions and in some cases suburban regions where they lean more Republican. Every state is a mixture of red and blue. So how are you going to divorce red states from blue states? You're acting like everyone in your state agrees with you. You're still going to be fighting each other within your states.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a little semantic where we know that there are states who are going to vote, who tend to vote, the majority vote a certain way. They're going to vote.
But my point is they're not monoliths, though. So even in New York, for example, the reason why New York is considered a blue state is because there are more people in the cities and in certain suburban areas, which outnumber the Republicans in the more rural areas. But if you look at a map of even New York, we look at it as a blue state, you'll see more red than blue because most of the land area is more sparsely populated, it's more rural, and they tend to vote more Republican up there. So sure, the Democrats outnumber the Republicans statewide, But to say this is a blue state, how? If you go up to other parts of New York, they're going to be very Republican. It's not like it's not like this. It's not, it's not like we're the same amount of blue or red everywhere. It depends on where you go in the state, and these states are very big.
Sure, but if you're talking about the numbers as a whole, and the majority, I think this is how we're classifying red and blue states, right? If the state votes blue, the majority of the time, the majority of the people are voting blue, then we got to.
Yeah, but that's an arbitrary distinction at that point, because even in New York City, for example, right? New York City, very Democratic on the whole. You go to certain areas of New York City, they vote very Republican. So what do you say? They're in the blue state now. They're in a blue city, but their entire neighborhood votes Republican. So
they're a red area in a blue state. I mean, we know this is not something that's far-fetched and out there. I mean, even during the Civil War, there were people in the South that didn't agree with the Confederacy.
Those are exceptions,
right? They're still the same thing.
It's not the same thing, no. It's not the same thing, because then you had the South largely in favor of slavery at the time, and the North largely opposed to it. Sure, you had exceptions, but it wasn't like it is now, where you can go into every state and find this division between red and blue, as distinct as it is. There really isn't. We're not unified within our states. We're just unified in terms of the way we look at these states. Like, this is a blue state, yes, because we understand it's a safe Democratic state in the presidential election, and usually the Democrats win in the state races as well. Okay, right. That's one way to categorize it. But when it comes down to the people in them, they're very diverse and mixed, and it's just a matter of one outnumbering the other. But it's not like we have this widespread agreement. We're fighting with our neighbors all the time.
Absolutely. But if you've got one that's outnumbering the other, and then they're going to be voting a certain way all the time, and that's how you're going to get these differentiation. And so this
why wouldn't there be a divorce within the state then? And you see that as well.
Huh?
Why wouldn't there be divorces within states then, within cities? Like, people say Staten Island wants to succeed and should succeed, and people sometimes joke about it, sometimes are serious about it. You see that all the time. People in the Rockaway say, why are we part of Queens, but so cut off? If we have all this disagreement amongst each other, how are we even united in that way in the first place? I mean, why is it a national divorce? Why wouldn't it be a local divorce, state divorce? We have so much division amongst ourselves.
The danger is that she is a member of Congress calling for this. And that's, this, like I said, the last time we had this talk would have been, the Civil War, the cessation of the South. And the only good thing about this, I think what in the comment, someone mentioned that Nikki Haley also said that states have the right to leave the Union, and she's a presidential candidate. This is more secession
for a Confederate flag, right?
And like, this is ridiculous that we have people running for office or in office at these highest levels on these major committees that are calling for this type of basically traitorous talk. You're talking about we should break the United States up, or advocating one of the Republicans, and I forget what representative it was that was commenting on Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments, basically saying that a civil war is coming.
I think I saw a poll. I think I saw a poll where a lot of, if not the majority of Americans, believed that we would experience a civil war at some point soon.
Sure, and I don't think that's far-fetched, especially with the division that we're seeing in the country, and with the extremism that we're seeing in the country. I don't think that's far-fetched.
It's so different from the Civil War, right, of the 1800s, because, like I said, you'll have neighbors shooting at each other now.
Well, that was also a Civil War.
Not to that extent, though. I mean, it wasn't
brother versus brother. That was the phrase that they used to describe it. Brother versus brother. People in the same family would be fighting on opposite sides.
But was that the norm? I mean, I don't think I think it was much more divided geographically then than it is now.
Maybe
now you're seeing that same kind of division of vitriol much more within our states and our cities, and sometimes our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think being more populated has something to do with that. But I mean, they took up arms. We haven't done that yet. So their degree of division. Not saying that we're not that far from it, though.
January 6th was close to a declaration of war, right?
Yeah, this is something I think should be even more talked about, discussed, and dealt with at the national level. Not just even for our internal sanity, but even for what you know, opponents are going to be looking to exploit this type of stuff. Like, this is what we're putting on display for the world right now, right? Our congressperson is out there calling for this type of stuff, and she's getting other Congress members that are speaking the same thing. Now, I say that, but I've seen some Republicans. I think there was a Republican governor. There's a couple of other Republican Congress people who are saying basically, look, you're crazy. You took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, and what you're talking about is very much against the Constitution. So there are some that have pushed back a little bit on that. So I think we can take some solace in that.
Right. You have to. You have to push back against it. But there's also that line that you walk between pushing back and calling out all this nonsense and dignifying it by even responding and taking it seriously. I mean, you do take it seriously because it poses a serious threat, but do you want to give that threat more oxygen because it's so much?
Sure. The thing is, it's, with the 24-hour news cycle, with social media, and that the reach of people who we would like to have go away, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's got a large following on social media. It's, even if people ignore her, it's still hundreds of thousands, millions of people that her message is going to go to. And she's a sitting congressperson. That's what's, to me,
the thing is this. I think that she gained so much prominence because the Democratic controlled House at the time took actions against her to punish her and strip her of committees and all that kind of thing, because that made her a martyr on the right, and it made her into this big star overnight. Whereas I do think a response is appropriate, but maybe try to do so in a way that doesn't make her a star. I mean, could you do it in a way that kind of keeps it on the quiet? We're gonna put you in timeout, but we're not gonna make a big deal about this.
I don't know if I don't know how possible that is when it's someone that's going to the public directly, right? Because of social media and people in her position having that access, having those followers. Doesn't matter what the governing body says, or they want to keep her quiet. She can go directly to the people.
Well, she's going to say what she wants, and she has a right to. She can say what she wants, fine. But I'm talking about what is the response to that. So you can make a big spectacle of it. I think that's what we saw. We saw Democrats making a big spectacle of it, and they basically did this to her, right? They elevated her platform. Should they have done that?
I think to some degree, it depends on how they go about it, but I think anyone bringing these types of things up need to be admonished, need to be pointed out about how wrong they are, instead of letting it grow and breathe in the public, because then it could just get legs and get even further. Because we're seeing stuff being talked about and said these days that was not acceptable to be said and talked about 20 years ago, and it's getting that kind of rhetoric is more and more dangerous, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But if you look at history, there's been nasty rhetoric.
Oh yeah.
Out. I mean, I was watching videos on Andrew Jackson last night. I mean, he straight up murdered people. Right? I mean, he killed someone in a duel who talked trash about his wife, and he had a bullet from that duel lodged in his chest for the rest of his life. I mean, so some perspective, as crazy as things are now. I mean, we've always kind of been dealing with nastiness in our politics.
Can you imagine, if I don't know, Senator Kennedy or somebody just rolled up into Congress with a strap, with a 6-gun. But I mean, what's crazy is I don't think we're that far from that, especially with the gun talk that's out there and this right to carry it anywhere. I don't think we're too far from somebody that's so pro-gun that they're going to show up to a congressional session with a loaded gun. I mean, we already seen rallies where they show up and they're carrying loaded weapons, not even just pistols, but like full on rifles and this and that. So, you know, I think it's crazy. It does bring to mind the question though. When did we stop doing pistols at dawn duels?
Right.
You know, like do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene would be spouting off as much if like one of her co-Congress people like was able to challenge her to a duel of pistols at dawn?
Well, the problem is though, when one side is very pro-gun, maybe they've had more training, maybe they've got more experience with guns. I mean, do you want to bring the congressperson armed with a latte, Marjorie Taylor Greene? I don't know. Well, Lauren Boebert, she really seemed like the gun one, right? The Colorado one.
Yeah, that's a fair point there. You know, card carrying NRA types have probably been to the gun range a few more times than like the liberal Hollywood avocado toast types.
It makes sense, right? If you're anti-gun, you might be less likely to spend your time at the gun range.
Right. Yeah. So did you really find the date? Nix in the chat just put in 1839. So I'm assuming that was
that was the last duel.
Was that the last duel? Like, where did you go get that?
1839. So here's a parlor game. Let's see. 1840 was the election of William Henry Harrison. So 1839. So Martin Van Buren was president. Okay. Did he outlaw it? Was he like enough of the duels?
That's crazy. Like, I'm assuming like she just put a date in there. It became illegal in 1839. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
That's the poll question of the week. Do you believe that
you think we should have dual?
The duel should be reinstated? Oh man.
Pistols at high noon.
Yeah, right. What was the thing? Take 10 steps and pace?
Yeah, 10 paces,
10
turn and fire.
Take 10 paces and spin. Something like that. 10
paces, turn and fire. Yeah.
And then it was like this weird thing where you were supposed to, if you were a gentleman,
right,
I'm going to duel you, but I'm going to take the gun, I'm going to shoot it above your head. But then oftentimes that didn't happen. Or sometimes the person would get shot and the other person would say it was an accident, but you don't know if you can believe them.
Why would you shoot it above the head?
That was supposed to be the gentleman's duel, right? They said, we're going to settle this in a duel. But then when it came time to it, it's like, all right, I've got a shot at you, but I'm going to be a bigger man. I'm going to aim above your head and say, the beef is over, and expect you to do the same thing to me. But
yeah, no, forget
you
that.
put your fate in your hands at that point.
Yeah, no. Because at that point, the game is already on. Like, you don't know if they're going to honor that. Like, you have to go through with shooting them or you're going to get shot.
I mean, I don't see, maybe Lixa can do this. Maybe Lixa can be our resident duel researcher, because I was kind of hoping that most duels ended in this gentleman's way where neither person got shot, but we've heard about ones where that didn't end up happening, that someone did die. Because I think that was something, even with the Alexander Hamilton Aaron Burr duel, which is the most famous duel in history, right? I believe the story was it was an accident, or I think Hamilton did shoot above Burr's head, right? But Burr actually shot him. And I think Burr might have said that he didn't mean to do that. He just was a bad shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. They had a lot of weird rules back then, you know. Even in the cowboy days, like you just can't shoot anybody in the back. Like that was like this amazing no-no. Like, it wasn't that we're gonna shoot and kill each other. Like, you just can't do it in my back.
They gotta see it coming.
Yeah, like, yeah. It's like, if you can agree on that, can you agree not to shoot each other? Like,
yeah, right. It's like the first step towards civility.
Right. You've already agreed on some rules. It's even like
right.
It's the same with war. Like, if we have rules of war, if we can come to that agreement,
right.
Can we already just agree not to have the war?
Right. Obviously, we see eye to eye on some things, right? So it's the first step. Well, let's see how far we can take this agreement.
Yeah, let's build on that.
Yeah.
So
speaking, go ahead.
20% of duels ended in deaths.
See, 20%. That means 80%. That's 4 out of 5, ended without that. So I think that was what you're supposed to do. If you were the gentleman in this, yeah, you would say, we're going to duel, but we're going to show that we're effectively squashing it, right? We're saying, I had the ability to kill you. I chose not to. You could have killed me. You chose not to. So that means that we're not going to fight each other to death when we see each other. We got it out of our system.
And I think that is probably the most apt definition of toxic masculinity. Like this other stuff doesn't count, but that is like, we just have to go through with it. We have to, because it's our ego on the line. People are watching. We have to go through with shooting at each other. I wonder if like in that era, 50 Cent would have been like the GOAT
Of duels?
I guess. Like he
I
walked
guess
it
of
off.
surviving, because he can take a lot of shots.
Yeah, he can walk it off 9 times,
That's
like,
right.
So.
Well, I was gonna say, speaking of building, might be past that segue now, but the bridge, right? We knew it as the Tappan Zee Bridge for many years. When Governor Cuomo was in office, he had it renamed the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge after his father, who was the former governor of New York himself. Now there's a bill to rename it back to the Tappan Zee Bridge, and Governor Hochul says if it's passed, she'll consider it, so she's not taking a position for or against right now. But it could be renamed the Tappan Zee Bridge again. I don't know. For me, I'm fine with it being called the Cuomo Bridge. I know that anytime anything is renamed, people argue with it and they say, I'm going to still call it the original name, right? The Jackie Robinson here in Queens into Brooklyn used to be called the Interborough. There are still people saying, I will always call it the Interborough. It will always be the Interborough to me. People are very stubborn when it comes to renaming things. At the same time, I understand why this is more controversial than usual, given that it was his father he named it after. So it's an interesting thing. He was governor at the time, don't forget. Politically, that could help a politician in office if the local bridge or infrastructure is named the same as them. Yes, I know it's his father, it's not him, but it's Cuomo, right? And so that sends us like subliminal message to voters or to the public that,
it's an ad.
Or yeah, I'm the man here. Why would you vote against me? I run this state, literally. You know what I mean? Like I get the bridge named after my name. So I can see why people would be upset with that. But Cuomo's not in office anymore. Maybe he might run again someday. We don't know. But do we need to be bickering back and forth about this? I mean, Mario Cuomo was the governor of New York when I was young. He was the governor, and people thought he should run for president. Very prominent political figure of the day. So I'm not categorically opposed to having a bridge in his name. Do we need the infighting? Do we need the back and forth? I mean, it should be Tappan Zee, it should be Cuomo. I mean, why not just leave it alone and focus on more important issues?
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who have opinions. You see in the chat, people are saying they've never called it the Cuomo Bridge. I think some of the comments again was that it was always going to be the Tappan Zee Bridge. Yeah, I think it's something that we're going to see.
Well, that's what you just hit on it right there. We're going to see, are we going to keep seeing that now with everything else? Is there going to be a movement to restore the name of every bridge, tunnel, and highway in the state or in the country? Like, is that going to be the trend now?
Right. Like at every time someone takes the seat, they're going to be like, or put forth something to change the name of it, for a couple of, for the next couple of years, we're going to call it this. For the next couple of years, we're going to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we need to be doing that?
I don't think so, but at the same time, it depends. It depends on what it is. Some things need to be renamed, some things should be changed, but I don't think it should be something that you're changing all the time. Like, I don't think anything should be named. What is it? Robert E. Lee something, or
I got stories.
Who was the president of the Confederacy?
Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis. Like, I don't think anything should be named in their honor, right? So those things I think should be changed.
They recently renamed a high school in Springfield, Virginia. It used to be called the Robert E. Lee High School, and it's not anymore. And I had friends there who went to that school, and I would ask them, doesn't that bother you? But growing up in Virginia, they never even noticed it. And I was actually dating an African woman from Nigeria, who actually her family was from Nigeria. She was born here, but she didn't like being called African American because our family is from Africa. So thought of herself as more of an immigrant family. And she was living off of a street called Fieldmaster Drive in Virginia. And I said, like, doesn't this, and she would just give directions to her house, make a run on Fieldmaster Drive. And doesn't that kind of bother you? Because in New York, we're not used to seeing names like that. And so I'm like, doesn't that Isn't that kind of offensive? But she's like, I never even thought about it. That's what she said. I never even thought about it because that's just
I
how
would imagine.
I grew up.
I would imagine for her that it probably wouldn't be something that she would connect to, because if she's an immigrant coming from, you know,
She wasn't an immigrant. She was born here, but her parents were.
right. So, but the culture that she comes from
Yeah.
wasn't connected to those atrocities, so they don't take that on, right? Or they don't recognize those things all the time.
It wasn't just her. I spoke to a lot of people in Virginia who told me they never even really thought about it.
Oh, okay.
It was what was I think it was Jefferson Davis. Route 1 in Northern Virginia was named after Jefferson Davis.
My elementary school in Mississippi was Jefferson Davis Elementary.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I think they've changed it within the last couple of years, but yeah, when I went there, it was Jefferson Davis Elementary. Yeah. So I think those names, those types of things should be changed, but flip-flopping between Cuomo and Tappan Zee, I don't know if that's, you know, it's not, it doesn't seem to be fixing or correcting any sort of wrong. You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of a bad thing.
Although you could point out the fact that the name Tappan Zee was a way to honor the native heritage of the area.
Right. Now, in that case, it probably shouldn't have been changed in the first place.
Yeah. You know, I also didn't love the fact that they renamed the Queensboro Bridge after Ed Koch before he died, especially because they wanted to honor him and kind of give him his flowers while he was still alive type thing. And I get why there's an urge to do that. But as a matter of policy, I don't really think we should be renaming things after people who are still alive.
Could we do something like honorary subnames? You know, like, you know, they do that with streets.
Yeah, but even that, even the street renamings have to be someone who passed away in New York.
Yeah, but do those streets, aren't they like subnames sometimes? They like
renaming, right? So they'll have the main street name still, and then underneath it, they'll have another one.
Right.
Never really like that though, because it's like, come on. I mean, I get why it's done.
Pick a name.
Shouldn't do it, but yeah, it's like pick a name. It's confusing, right? Like it's this, and it's this, and which one is it? It's like we like you enough to put your name under the street, but not enough to give you the street name. It's like almost like a slap in the face. Like it's like passive aggressive in a sense.
Yeah.
I get why they do it too, because they want to be able to rename a lot more. And then you can rename just the street corner or just parts of a street, and you're not having to change the GPS and all the maps and everything, you know, the addresses, post office, everything doesn't have to change. So you're just honoring someone by putting them on the street sign without really changing the address. So I get that, and there's a utility in doing that. But to me, it's like, hey, listen, if we're gonna go all out, let's give them the street, right?
Right. Says Ed Koch was the exception. He was a goat.
Who said that?
Lixa in the chat.
Yeah, then that was a city council vote, and they voted to approve it at the time. I remember, you know, it happened, but
Wait, so the bridge is called the Koch Bridge now?
yeah.
It wasn't that when I was
like all these bridges, right? The Triborough was the RFK Bridge.
Yeah, because I wasn't there when I was there.
No, this is recent. Relatively recent.
Yeah, I would think there'd be some other things that you have on your plate before you go through to take the time to rename bridges and things.
And sometimes that's all government seems to do, right? It's like we can't agree on major policy items. Let's just rename a post office.
Right. So I think we should probably make that one the poll of the week.
Sure. So, all right, we named so many. So we're doing the Cuomo one, right? So we want to ask what's going on, if we should go back, right? So the poll question of the week is, do you agree that the Marjorie Cuomo Bridge should be renamed the Tappan Zee Bridge?
Should be renamed. I want to
renamed.
Renamed.
Renamed again.
Should be reverted back to.
The poll question of the week is, do you believe that the Marjorie Cuomo Bridge should be renamed the Tappan Zee Bridge once again?
There we go. Yeah. There we go. So, I mean, yeah.
Well, speaking of polls.
Yes.
We did put out a poll last week about whether YouTube and social media platforms like it should have liability when third-party users post content to these platforms that result in damages. And the case we brought up was before the Supreme Court about a terror attack that happened in France, and the family of the American victim is suing YouTube, Google, saying that they should be held liable because there were videos that were on the platform which were shown to users, and their argument, I guess, that the algorithm would keep pushing this type of dangerous content to them, which radicalized them and resulted in the killing. So to what extent is the platform itself liable? They weren't the ones, obviously, who posted the video, but it's on their site, and they do have increasingly sophisticated algorithms these days that are supposed to look for this type of thing, I guess.
Right. And as it is now, they're not expected to be liable, but this case is being brought to the Supreme Court to see if it can go forward, because this family wants YouTube and them to be liable for it, and they're saying, this could prevent radicalizing people in the future, so this doesn't have to happen again, sort of thing.
Right. So, and as we discussed, it could really change the entire way the internet works if it's right, because we kind of have this idea now, and it's codified in the law, that there's a safeguard. These platforms have this safe harbor where they're not held liable for the content that the users post. And that enables users to post all kinds of things, enables these platforms to thrive because they don't have to monitor everything. They can't possibly monitor everything that gets posted, and the algorithms aren't going to be perfect. So we have this Newtown Square, as we discussed it previously on the show, where that's how everyone just makes their speech now. And we've come accustomed to this in society. We upload videos to YouTube, we do a post on Facebook, pictures on Instagram, tweets, whatever it is, TikTok. But we're putting all this content online, and we think of it as our content, the user's content. And Facebook and these platforms, YouTube, they all have their terms and everything. They can set their own policies. That's all well and good. But there's this kind of wide berth where we understand that it's not their speech. It's not them doing it. They're just hosting it for us. And so they're not held liable unless it comes to their attention and they refuse to take action, like in the case of IP law we discussed. If you put up a video that violates someone's copyright, now they do have more algorithms and mechanisms to give the profits to the rights holders and things like that. But the general framework is YouTube is not responsible for that, or any platform is not responsible for that unless it's brought to their attention by the rights holder and there's a complaint made to them. Then they do have to take action, or they can be swept into litigation as well. So that's how we understand things to work now. This could potentially change that, or start to change that, and hold these platforms accountable for what other people are doing on them.
Right. All right. As a default, and that means everything is would change. Like anything that you upload, if people are upset about how strict some of these platforms have gotten with content. Some people complain about, oh yeah, I just made a comment to my friend's post that was a joke and it got flagged on air for bullying or something like that. And it was just a joke that I made to my friends. Like these platforms will get much stricter if they're liable.
If they're liable, because what's going to happen? It's going to result in billion-dollar lawsuits and multi-million-dollar lawsuits.
Yeah,
for everything that goes on. Whereas now, okay, that liability might exist with the individual user, but chances are you're not going to file a $10 million lawsuit against Joe Blow on the street who has no money. But when it's Google, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to hire a lawyer and sue them for $1 billion.
Every day.
Every time. Every single time.
I mean, YouTube itself, there are 500 hours worth of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. I mean, that's every day someone's going to be offended by something and then bring a lawsuit.
Right. So and that's going to drastically change the model, because they're not going to be able to withstand that. And we know they have deep pockets, but you're talking about multi-million-dollar lawsuits every day. No, they're going to go out of business, where they're going to have to change their business.
Absolutely. So, so we put the poll out, and there were 1,700 views on it on YouTube within 30 minutes, and we had several comments that were posted here. One person said they should be liable if they practice censorship, because that's speech when you control what people say. If you do not practice censorship, then you should be free of any liability to what say. And so the point that they were trying to get at was that if you're practicing censorship, that means you're choosing what to allow and what not to allow. So in that case, if this stuff is put on there and it's radicalizing people, then you chose to allow it on there. So then they bear some sort of responsibility.
I understand that, but that's a dangerous way to think, I believe, because that will lead to more radicalization. You're telling them, don't do anything, right? Because you don't even want to dip your toe into this arena, because then you'll become liable. So just stay out of it and let hell break loose, right? Like, don't even make any attempt to keep this under control.
Right. Yeah. So that was actually a response that came up a couple of times, actually. Someone said if sites want to editorialize the content, then yes. If they allow free speech, then the commentator would be liable. So that idea kept coming up over and over again. There was also someone who said, absolutely not, ever. They aren't posting the content because who's actually right enough to make a decision of what's right or wrong? There's no way to do it.
Well, you can hit us up on Reddit at Nuance Show. And here's a comment I received on that platform. The comment says, yes, they are responsible for giving inflammatory people a platform, and they are responsible for promoting those people with their algorithms. It has been a proven fact that YouTube pushes severe misogynistic / incel content on any user that they perceive to be a male teenager. That's what this comment says. We touched upon that notion that
the algorithms, yeah,
right, the algorithm will try to push you further into the rabbit hole. I don't know if what he's saying is exactly true, but that got me thinking of something also. Under this new framework that's attempted to be created right here, would we be liable for reading a comment like that on the air if it turns out not to be true? Right? It's
right.
Because it's like, the way we look at it, no, I'm just reporting basically what this person is saying, and that's the truth. But now you're trying to say, let's blame the host, let's blame the messenger almost, right? And so I think there's an analog here. Like, so you can start suing people for reporting what other people say, even if that's not true, because that's kind of what YouTube is doing. It's hosting content that they're saying is dangerous. But YouTube is not being false or untrue by showing you that this is out there. It's just saying, hey, look, there's a video out here that's crazy, and you can take it for what it is, but it's here, right? And now we're saying, but YouTube should be responsible for showing people that this thing is being said or is out there.
Right. And you know, the nuanced part of the issue is the algorithm, I think, because of the algorithm is what suggests people more of this type of content. And it's not just like you can look at something that's a little bit out there, right? And then YouTube will start showing you not only that same vein of a little bit out there, but it'll start showing you something that's a little bit further out there until you get all the way to crazy point, right? And so I can understand that point of saying, okay, look, the algorithm, someone programmed that algorithm to do that because they wanted to create more engagement on the platform. They wanted to keep users on the platform. So you are responsible to some degree for that. I get that, but I don't think they should be responsible for everything that's put on the platform. Because it's just, one, it's just simply too much. Two, it would be a major problem. These platforms couldn't exist. It wouldn't work.
And, you know, people talk about free speech. Isn't that a major free speech concern to tell YouTube now that you can't host certain videos?
But yeah, absolutely. But we do that though, right? I mean, YouTube does take videos down that are...
They're choosing to take it down. The government isn't forcing them to take it down. I mean, sometimes if it's, like we said, the IP issue, copyright violation, then there are certain laws they got to look out for. And that's always the tension between free speech and other types of unprotected speech. Yes. But I mean, as a general matter, we're telling YouTube now what it can host and what it can't host, even if the content is protected speech, right? So I'm not talking about we're gonna say that YouTube has to keep up copyrighted material. No, I'm talking about speech that we know is protected, is covered by the First Amendment normally. We're telling YouTube now that YouTube is not allowed to host protected First Amendment speech on its own platform.
Right. I think, yeah. it just becomes an issue when, I mean, they didn't specify specific videos. Just they're saying videos that radicalized whoever these people were that committed these things. So there had to be some things that might have been an opposing opinion of some people, or something that led towards some kind of
led towards
view,
yeah.
or
But we
and
spoke
that would
about
be
this
like
last
Alex
week.
Jones. So, for example,
Yeah.
like should the government tell the YouTube that they can't put Alex Jones
Right.
on, right? Or should they be responsible for his theories on the what was it, the shooting,
Right.
Parkland
The
shooting?
Australian government can, and in England they do things like that. But our First Amendment here in the US would preclude that from happening. Alex Jones does have a right to say. It doesn't mean Twitter has to have them. It doesn't mean YouTube has to have them. They can choose not to. But now we're talking about the government telling YouTube, in effect, they have to take this down. And last time we spoke about the difference between propaganda and inciting violence, and the distinction might not have been so clear, but to incite violence, the danger has to be imminent. And so it can't be this idea that, okay, they saw something and that gave them these radical ideas and that led them down this rabbit hole to make them want to get more involved in these terror groups, and eventually they did an attack. That's not considered incitement. As much as we don't like that type of speech, that is protected First Amendment speech, because it's propaganda, it's hate speech, it's all these nasty things, but we don't consider it imminently inciting the violence. If it was imminent, it would be more like maybe a video telling everyone tomorrow or later on today, we're going to go shoot up this thing, or we're going to commit this act of violence. And everyone does it because they see that video. It's like a call to action and it's immediate. That would be not protected by the First Amendment. But if it's propaganda, down with the USA, whatever nonsense that they're saying on there, and that leads them to become radicalized, again, not speech that we like, but speech that the First Amendment does protect. And so if you're going to hold YouTube or Google liable for that speech, if you're going to say they must pay this payout, the settlement or whatever to this family because they kept it on their site, yes, you are implicating their First Amendment rights. You're telling them that this speech, which the First Amendment protects, you aren't allowed to host on your site by law, because if you do, we're going to make you pay as a government, right? And that's why it crosses the line into a First Amendment violation.
Right. As I mentioned, Alex Jones was kicked off of YouTube. Yes, but that was YouTube that kicked Alex Jones off.
They chose
not the government, right?
The government didn't tell YouTube you must take him down, and when we say the government, it's not like this monolithic thing. I'm talking about even is via lawsuit, right? If someone were to sue YouTube and saying that Alex Jones radicalized my child, and so because you kept Alex Jones on your site, now you owe us $1 billion. If the government, meaning the court, right? The government, the court system is the judicial branch of the government. So let's not forget, this is part of the government. If the court were to say to YouTube, they must pay, there must be repercussions, right? We're going to hold you liable, accountable as a government for hosting this site. Now you're implicating YouTube's First Amendment rights. You're saying this is free speech, yes, but it doesn't apply to you.
Right. It was the platforms. He was also pulled off of the other ones, Twitter, I think, whichever ones he was on. And it was same with Trump. He was pulled off of a variety of these platforms. And listen, I think people, spouting that nonsense should be, but that's not the government doing. That's these private companies who have set up these terms of service, these standards of conduct that some of this types of speech goes against, and so they pull it down.
Right. So the poll results here, let's see. The question again was, should platforms like YouTube be held liable for inflammatory content posted by third-party users which causes damages? 71% of respondents on Reddit said no, 29% said yes.
And I think that the comments that I read that we got, to me, seemed like they were more conservative comments, and it was more of a political bias, because they're saying, oh, if you're practicing censorship and this and that, then, and I think that's the argument we get about when like Trump was pulled off of the platform, right? Because of his outrageous things that he was saying that could have caused issues, but they're saying, oh, well, it's just a difference of opinion, and so this is being unfair. And I think that's the sense where I got where this line of thinking was coming from, some of these comments.
But you see the difference.
I see the difference, but
Right. I'm just trying to like spell it out for people who might not see it yet. The difference between the platform voluntarily taking someone off because they say that it violates their terms, whatever terms that is, versus the government telling Twitter, you must take Trump off. Imagine the government did that. I mean, that's clearly a First Amendment issue.
Right. And I don't think we've seen that even being attempted, that I'm aware of.
That's in effect what you're doing by having this lawsuit, by saying they must pay all this money for keeping the speech up, or keeping the content up.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see how that progresses. That could be a major change to everything on the internet. That could be a major change to even Nuance. We'd have to be careful of what we're saying.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking that. Imagine that. I mean, I was even thinking in terms of defamation laws. I know that's not exactly the same, but it's kind of like going down that rabbit hole, right? Of saying that you're responsible for the content of other people. So even if I were to report what someone else said, if that statement turned out to be untrue and cause damages, would I be in trouble under this new framework for reporting that someone else even said it? I think that's a dangerous line to walk, because then you're saying that we don't even believe that it should be acknowledged that this stuff is out there. You shouldn't even be allowed to show that it exists. You're just trying to sweep it under the rug, basically.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Again, my heart goes out to the family, and I understand they're looking for some sort of closure. But yeah, it's a crazy thing.
It is crazy. On that note, what is the bottom line, Jay?
Oh, well, I think, we talked about a couple of different things here. And I think the bottom line here is that we should be aware of what's out there. We should also do our due diligence. We should seek to do better. We should seek to hold each other accountable, and hold ourselves accountable for what's going on, to try to steer ourselves away from the path that we're going down, whether it's being radicalized, whether it's being more extreme, whether it's conspiracy theories, or just, flat earth type of stuff, or whatever. We should be trying to do better. And hopefully that's a direction that we can get back to.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the Tupac interview where he said that reporters in Vietnam showing how gruesome it was is really what led us to get out, and for the people to be motivated to demand that we put an end to this. Hearing the stories was one thing, but seeing that violence and that horror really was the emotional trigger that we needed to take action. And I'm reminded of that here with this YouTube case where, there is a lot of nastiness in the world, but should we be hiding it? Should we be holding people liable for showing it to us? Or should we acknowledge that it's part of our society, it's happening, and we're horrified by it, but we need to see it. We need to know it's there in order to be able to take action against it.
Right. And then that in that exact same way, he didn't, he could have gone back not further, but he could have gone back to the civil rights struggle. That was one of the catalysts that helped change some minds across the country when they're watching the fire hoses being, blasted on Black protesters, and the dogs and the beatings by the police, when some of the people in the North got to see these things on television and started to see what was happening and not just hear about it. That was one of the things that helped change some of the minds, and get some of this stuff changed.
Right. And I don't think a world where we can't see that is a better one. I think we should be able to shine a light on that and confront the horror that it is. And yeah, I mean, it does sometimes have side effects. You see, sometimes people are radicalized in a way we don't want them to be from seeing you. People can exploit that. And yeah, all this bad stuff. There are negative side effects of everything. But I don't think the answer is to suppress it and just kind of bury our heads in the sand. Because if we do that and we can't see it, we'll never be able to stop it.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, as always. This has been Nuance, and You can catch us on Facebook Live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, the replays are available on YouTube at Nuance with Scala and Jay Carter. And podcast form. If you listen to podcasts, please subscribe on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and the audio will be pushed to your device automatically.
Absolutely. And that was a good wrap up there. That was a good one. Got it.
All right. Don't forget also Instagram.
Instagram, Nuance Show, same as YouTube.
Yeah, and Reddit as well. Probably post the polls up on Reddit. This one, see, I kind of switched them up a little bit. This one about the bridge is probably going to be better for my local social media following than the wider Reddit following. So depending on the topic, it might be in a different place. But we're all over these social media platforms. We got to do more TikTok stuff.
Yeah. Oh, Jeremy comes in at the final hour with a peace out.
All right.
Jeremy, good night, everyone. Thank you for showing up tonight. We definitely appreciate it.
Have a great night. As always, we've got work to do. Until next time.